Good evening, everyone. Our top story today is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all the great dads out there. It's not an easy job. Somebody's got to do it. I'm a dad myself. Happy Father's Day to me. I'm just kidding, but yeah, keep grinding, guys. These kiddos really appreciate it. So happy Father's Day to all those dads out there. Now that that's out of the way, our top story today is T Higgins finally has signed his quote unquote deal. So it's not a new deal. He just signed his franchise tag. You could tell that he wasn't incredibly happy about how this entire situation played out, and there's going to be some implications for that down the line. Also, want to talk about the reports coming out of Seattle camp around. Obviously, there's been the injury to JSN, but also the way that they're planning to use DK Metcalf is really interesting and may finally lead to him. Finally getting over 100 targets like we've always wanted him to. There's some news again about Blake Corum. He again continues to garner praise from their coaches there. And there's just a lot of other news. So we're going to tackle all of this and more on Player Profiler today. All right, so hi, my name is Toomey. I go by FF Strategist on TikTok. Make sure you give me a follow there, but obviously give us a follow here. We're going live every single day around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the news, latest news of the day, and talking about the fantasy implications for it. So what I need you to do is stop everything you're doing, click subscribe, like the video, and even add a comment. If you like this video, just say, hey, like the video, like the content, or you could even put a comment like, hey, to me, I hate this content, whatever. But make sure you guys are plugged in and contributing to the community to make sure that we continue to grow and provide you with this free content. All right, so now that that's out of the way, all the plugs. All right, so T Higgins story of the day. So T Higgins signs his franchise tag, which is 1 year, $21.8 million contract. So I mean, it's never a bad day if you're going to get $21 million. Um, so but we all know like he wanted to sign like a long-term deal or he wanted to be traded. And so neither one of those things happened. He signs the franchise tag. He'll now be outside of the top 15 receivers on an annual pay basis, behind players the likes of Diggs, Michael Pittman Jr., Ridley. You can argue that all those players are still better than T. Higgins, but he definitely wanted to get into the top 10 range for sure. But this at least will ensure that T. Higgins is going to be there day one of training camp that's going to be coming up in a few weeks, and he's just not going to get a long term deal. Even in the rumblings, even around this report, say that it just does not seem likely that he's going to get a long term deal done with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I would not be surprised if T. Higgins was a mid-season trade target. It really is like a perfect candidate for it. No long-term deal. Once a new deal has already talked about a trade, and if there's a situation where a receiver goes down during the season, or there's a team who's trying to make a playoff push or Super Bowl push, he is a perfect receiver to add into the fold, especially near the red zone. Now, I do think for him, basically, it's gonna kind of be like a tryout for him this year. I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I think there's no chance that he resigns with the Bengals. I feel like that bridge has been completely burned. I think this is the last year you're gonna see Chase and T. Higgins, and I feel like they drafted Jermaine Burton in the third round from Alabama for a reason to eventually replace T. Higgins on this roster. Who Jermaine Burton, really high upside, incredibly athletic player from Alabama, who's had some off the field issues, more about, I guess you'd say, like attitude than anything. I don't think he's gotten into any legal trouble. But I do think that their plan is to really bring Burton along to be the T. Higgins replacement. So, another thing that this kind of means is, well, yes, T. Higgins is not super happy with the situation that just happened. I do think this was the first domino to fall in the Jamar Chase deal. Jamar Chase, he's at least been participating, quote unquote, in mandatory minicamp, but it's been only on a walkthrough basis. He was not going to fully participate in any drills or in any 7-on-7s, etc., until he got his extension done. And I believe that this needed to happen. T. Higgins needed to sign the deal, get traded or something before the team was going to move on Jamar Chase. So I do think that this is at least a good sign that Chase's deal is going to get done at some point this offseason. I have a lot of faith in that. But what does all this mean for fantasy? Okay, like what does this mean for fantasy? What does this mean in redraft leagues? So my headline from the story is I think that T. Higgins is going to be incredibly motivated, right? Like he is on a one season tryout, 1 year tryout. He's really almost auditioning for his next team. And so I think again, right now, his value is really solid. His ADP is around like 62nd overall. That's like a fifth round ADP in a 12 team league. Wide receiver 29. I love that value. But I am just a guy who's not super sold on T Higgins. So even though I love the value, I think he's actually at the value he needs to be. I actually don't think it's like a great value. I think it's like this is where he needs to be. If he went any higher, I'm not really interested in T Higgins. And that may sound a little controversial, but if you look at how he's been over his entire career, he's been the definition of meh, like the definition of mid. Like he has just never been incredibly impressive. Um, he finished the season. Just want to make sure I get this right. Wide receiver 40 last year, 26 the year before, wide receiver 12, which is good, and then wide receiver 35. That's not super elite, and we always draft him as if he's like a top 10 receiver, and he's only been close to that one time, and that was per game because he missed a few games that season as well, his sophomore season. And so I've just never been super impressed with him. Like I don't know. I mean, clearly he's a great jump ball artist. You would think he has like a ton of touchdowns. He's never had over seven. It's just a player who I really struggle with. I feel like we all want to see something more than what we're getting with T Higgins. And so I mean, honestly, I think that's what the Bengals see. I think that's what I see as just a fan. And I just worry about his total upside, especially if he's not going to be on this team long term. Now it's like you always see like contract year players, especially running backs. A lot of times they really go crazy that year they're on contract. Like we saw Josh Jacobs winning the rushing title and getting that big deal, or getting. He actually didn't get a big deal right after the rushing title, but like you actually see these players ball out basically in their contract season. But it just feels like it's a lot harder for receivers to do that, and especially if the receiver's not the number one option on their team. So it's not like they're going to get 100% overloaded with targets. The target disparity for Jamar Chase and T Higgins has gotten wider every single year, and so that's one thing I'm just kind of concerned about with T Higgins. So again, at his current ADP, I'm fine with it. But if I had to take him higher than that, if he's going to go up because of this deal, I'm going to completely pass on that. I'm not going to be buying into this raising ADP that we may see from T Higgins. Um, I also think that I'm going to take, if anyone wants to start dropping Jamar Chase in the first round further than he already is. He's kind of going around pick 5 or 6. If he starts dropping to the back of the first round, that's insane. So I honestly don't expect that to happen. But if it does, snatch up that value. Don't get crazy. He's still the number one target by a long shot on this team. And then, like I already mentioned about Jermaine Burton, I think he's an amazing pickup in Dynasty. And a lot of people may not be paying attention to the weeds of the conversation, even though T Higgins just signed his deal today, you want to make sure that you're picking up Jermaine Burton because I do think this even tells you that he is in the plans for the future more so than T Higgins. All right, so we got a lot more news that I'm going to get to, but let's talk about it on the other side of this break. All right.
This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly. Especially now, it's Best Ball Mania season, baby! Best Ball Mania 5! I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems. But they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off.
Go draft your ass off. So, like the Podfather says, make sure you guys are tapping into best ball, tapping into Underdog, especially. Um, Using that site and making sure that you are practicing even in best ball, and obviously you can win money if you win the entire competition with all the unique strategies there. It just makes you a better fantasy player. But also, there's like some unique strategies that our channel in particular, they talk about pretty extensively about how important stacks are, about how important like different types of correlations are for this throughout the season, especially as you get to the playoff picture in week 17, how important that is. All those specific strategies, we talk about that on our network. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the main channel, Player Profiler, but also to Player Profiler News, where we're doing this show every day, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, next. DK Metcalf. Next story. So Seahawks head coach Mike McDonald said the team wants to get DK Metcalf in motion more in 2024. They're just trying to get the ball to him a lot this season, and it does seem like when this new coaching staff came in, one of the things that popped to them on film apparently was DK Metcalf. So here's his quote. He's a big, imposing, fast, powerful receiver, McDonald said, and team wants to ensure opposing defenses have to account for DK at all times, but it's going to be hard to find him. That is that is so damn refreshing to hear. You know what I mean? As somebody who I love DK Metcalf, I love the prospect, but it's just been hard for me to buy into him in fantasy unless I'm in a only touchdown league. I really love hearing that. That's been my biggest gripe with how the Seahawks used him his entire career there. They just do not get him the ball enough. They get him the ball and they target him in the red zone like a bug, but they are not getting him the ball throughout the field. They're not putting him in motion. They're not doing anywhere near the amount of crossers they need to do with a guy like that who can catch and run. Um, so that's really encouraging to see. So apparently, DK Metcalf, 84% of his pass routes were from the boundary in 2023, which is no surprise. And he only saw 12 targets from the slot last season, which is pretty standard for his entire career. The reason why this is super exciting is Ryan Grubb. He's the new OC. He came from the University of Washington, where he played with, or where he coached Penix and Romeo Dunze, Jalen Polk, all those that entire group of elite players and receivers. And one of his focuses in that offense is getting the ball down the middle of the field and getting the ball to the slot receiver. I forgot the exact statistic, but a large chunk of the pass plays go to the slot receiver in this offense. And so initially, when people heard that, I think everyone was obviously thinking, all right, JSN breakout season, which could easily happen. I think JSN's definitely due for a better season than he had last year. But if we're going to start throwing DK all over the formation and we're going to truly start using him as like the alpha of this receiving game outside of the red zone, the value on DK is too low. The value on DK is way too low. So my headline is we got to stop sleeping on DK. He always has a TD upside, but now you're going to be plugging in more targets. That's top 10 receiver level if he can hit those marks. So his current ADP is fourth round. That's honestly that's still pretty good value regardless of them changing around their offense or not. And that's wide receiver 22. Now he actually kind of ends up around there a lot of seasons, but some seasons he's much higher due to his touchdowns, but other seasons he's kind of in that range. Um, I just think that there's so much upside, especially when you think of the fact that I don't think he's ever had more than 90 receptions in any season of his career. And if you look at the top receivers every year in fantasy, outside of Mike Evans last year, you're always over 100 targets. And so I think in this type of scheme, if they're going to start passing the ball more, they're going to start targeting him and moving him around the formation just to get him the ball. If he can get over that 100 receptions number, I think you're jumping in the top 10 receiver status and you're getting him at a great value in the fourth round. And then I think because of the red zone work, he is still a pretty safe target. So like I said, without all the increase in targets, he's still probably going to end up around this range anyway. This is his red zone targets over the last few seasons. I'll start with his rookie season and move up because it changes really dramatically. So he was 25th in red zone targets his first year. He was 32nd in red zone targets his second year, but he was wide receiver 10 per game. He was just catching like a lot of big touchdowns. Um, and then from here, this is red zone target percentage in the NFL. He was first, and sixth last year. So this guy is a red zone monster. They target him crazily in the red zone. And so again, if you're going to start tacking on more and more targets, being creative with him in the formations, giving him jet sweeps, letting him do those crossers I keep talking about where he could run and catch and make people miss and run people over. Um, if you start getting him that 12 plus targets a game, you're getting him those receptions and you're still targeting him like crazy at a top 6 rate in the league in the red zone. I don't know how you can't see a top 10 receiver there. So yeah, he's rising up my draft boards with a report like this. You don't want to overreact to anything until you start to see football in the field, but this makes sense, and I could easily see a new coaching staff come in and think the same thing to DK. So that's why I'm kind of buying into this. And when you really compare to like these last two receivers I've talked to, I would significantly rather have DK Metcalf over a T Higgins. Um, I think T Higgins is capped just based on the Jamar Chase factor. That's definitely going to be a factor no matter what. But I think that T Higgins, like his touchdown upside to me is capped, his reception upside to me is capped, even with a better quarterback. DK is the alpha in this offense, and the way that they're talking about utilizing him all over the field. You have Tyler Lockett, who started to fall off a cliff last year, and you have JSN, who right now is dealing with an injury. But also, it's not a guarantee that he's going to even step up into a sophomore campaign. I could easily see a situation where DK can dominate this year. So yeah, I'd much rather have DK Metcalf over a T Higgins. All right, next story. We're cruising along. This is gonna be a short episode, and I didn't really mention clearly I have a different setup today. I'm traveling on the road. I'm on the West Coast, so yeah, it's very late here. This is a pre-recorded show, if you couldn't tell. So sorry if you guys are putting in comments. I'll respond to them when I hop into the chat. But it's not gonna be live. All right. All right, so next story. Blake Corum has really stood out in offseason practices, according to Rams coach Sean McVay. All right, so this is the quote from Sean McVay. On the offensive side, I've been pleased with a lot of guys, but Blake Corum has really stood out. McVay said, mature beyond his years. I love the way that he handles himself. I love even more how when there's been a couple of things that didn't go the way he wanted or the way we wanted, how he responded the next play. The mental toughness that you see from him, that's really high praise from a coach like a Sean McVay. I think that's type of thing really matters to him. And so I've been saying this all offseason. This is no surprise. I don't think that Kyren Williams is going to be a bust, but I would say I think he may be a bust at his ADP. If you're taking Kyren Williams in the third, possibly even fourth round, I think that's kind of where he's going to end up. And he's going to be still the lead back in this backfield. But if you do not think that Blake Corum is going to be taking some touches from him, I think you're insane. And so, yeah, taking him at the back of the first round and the beginning of the second round, to me, you're asking to lose your league. Like you are not going to get that value from Kyron Williams that you got last year if you take him that high. For many reasons, I mean, I hate repeating this because I've talked about it ad nauseum, but he's smaller than Blake Corum. He's clearly shown that he's injury prone, dealing with a foot injury right now. And he's dealt with lower body, foot, ankle injuries before. The way that the scheme is set up, you really do take a lot more direct shots. And I mean, obviously, Blake Corum has basically been born and bred to run at this gap running scheme. Versus Kyron Williams, he's just not built like that to be able to handle like running through defensive tackles to grind out yards on a dive. Um, and then I think one of the biggest things with Kyron is the high level of snap share and opportunities that he got at the running back position. He had the number one opportunity share. Sorry, number one running back snap share last year in the league, and was RB2 per game. But to me, and I mean, this is a limited sample size. Maybe he'll just be crazily efficient next year. But I mean, you had the number one running back opportunities in the league last year, running back snap share. That's just not going to happen again. And so, because of a Blake Corum being there, there's just natural regression that has to occur if Blake Corum is going to be half as good as we think he is. So, Blake Corum taking potentially 40% of the work, Kyron Williams cannot be that highly rated just based on the opportunities and based on how inefficient he was with it. So that's why to me, I'm just not as high as on Kyron like a lot of people are. Again, I'm happy to take him in the third or fourth, but he literally never falls there, so I'll never have him. But whereas Blake Corum is going though, he's still going in the 10th round. Still going in the 12th, 10 to 12th round sometimes in redraft leagues. And so I think that's free money right there. Maybe nothing happens to Kyron and he's healthy for a full season, which would be the first time. And then Blake Corum is truly just a handcuff, and maybe Kyron just dominates touches and just gets stronger, bigger, or something, even though he didn't report bigger in the offseason. Yeah, that's a pipe dream. That's not going to happen. Blake Corum's going to factor in. Blake Corum's going to start a couple games, and I do think if Blake Corum starts a few games, the tide will shift where he's just going to be the lead back by the end of the season. So yeah, I'll gladly take Blake Corum in the 10th to 12th round, and I'm passing on Kyron Williams. Okay, next story. Kind of getting to the end of it here. I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick. All right, next. So NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reported that Alvin Kamara departed from Saints minicamp, and it was contract related. So Alvin Kamara, I believe he um, is set to make over $18 million. Yeah, he's set to make over $18 million this season. But he just has really, really, really little guarantees. So I think it's $1 million in guarantees either this season or over the next 2 seasons. It's really small. And so according to his agent, Brad Sikala, I don't know if I said that right. Sikala, it's one of the two. According to the agent, um, Alvin Kamara is not really happy with this deal. Oh, sorry, that was very loud. Alvin Kamara is really not happy with this deal, and it seems like he's looking for an improvement, especially on the guaranteed side. It's interesting just because that $18 million is really significant compared to other running backs in the NFL. Um, And I don't know when you have 2 years left on your deal, when you're going into your age 29 season, when you haven't been playing as well down the stretch. I don't It's an interesting leverage play that I don't believe he has to try to squeeze some money out of the Saints. And so yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because also one thing that I learned as well is that the Saints could actually save $18 million, I believe, against the cap if they cut Alvin Kamara after this season. So all of this tells me one, I think Alvin Kamara is going to be on the team. I think he's going to sign something, or I think he's just going to return without a deal. Basically, I think he's going to play this season. I think he's a good value where you're getting him. He's another guy going in the fifth round, which is really odd for somebody who ended the season as the RB4 per game, and almost purely because of his receptions work. But because of that caveat I said about them being able to cut him after this season, I think it would be NFL malpractice to not give Kendre Miller a good solid shot to see if he's the guy of the future. Um, I really try to remove myself as like a fan, and just really think, even remove myself as a fantasy analyst, but just think of myself as like if I'm a coach on that team or if I'm one of the front office personnel of the Saints, the goal this year is to know going into my offseason if Alvin Kamara is the guy or is Kendre Miller going to be able to carry the torch moving forward. Even if it's not like the entire season, there will be a stretch of games where Kendre Miller is the league dog. So now you got to kind of gauge when you want to put him on your roster, but I wouldn't mind handcuffing Alvin Kamara because the values are kind of commensurate with that. So you can get Alvin Kamara in the fifth, you can get Kendre Miller basically for free in like the 12th round of a 12-team league. So I never mind pairing those two, and then you just own the backfield, especially again for a really pass happy running back approach that the Saints have. And I also think that this new Kubiak system may be pretty good for the lead running back of the Saints. So again, I love the value of both guys, but I'm definitely like cautious that Kendrick Miller is going to be getting on the field in some form or fashion. So I'm definitely trying to pick him up for free at the end of my draft if I can. Um, Next, we're just trying to cruise through this one. I'm on the West Coast. It's very late here, and I'm trying to go to bed. So let's just do some quick hits for a couple stories in the NFL. First one is Saints related as well. So Taysom Hill, he restructured his contract, and he's apparently taking some running back snaps. So I think that, I mean, they just absolutely love this man Taysom Hill, and the fact that he's taking running back snaps, I don't think that means he's not going to be taking Kamara off the field or anything. But I just think it just again reinforces the fact that you need to make sure that this guy is picked up in any league you have because it happens every year. We go through our drafts, especially in redraft. No one drafts Taysom Hill. He's one of the pickups in like week 3 or 4, and then he ends up giving us like a top 12 tight end value. So why don't you just cut out the middleman and just draft him week one, especially with the fact that Juwan Johnson had such a significant injury that's going to require surgery, and they're hoping he's going to be back at the start of the season. So he actually, like Taysom Hill, may be running the ball in the backfield like a running back, running the ball in the backfield like a quarterback, maybe throwing the ball like a quarterback, but then also possibly just being a tight end because Juwan Johnson is dinged up, and he may be getting some more snaps in that respect, especially in PPR. That'll be a big boost for a player like him, whose value in PPR and standard really, really, really differs. Um, so yeah, that's just one of those guys. I feel like, especially in best ball, a lot of times you want to take like 2 to 3 tight ends. Perfect second or third tight end to add on your team because you know he's gonna have some spike weeks, and if especially if he throws like a touchdown pass somehow, it's a cheat code. And like especially based on the format of your league, like I'm adding him every single league I have. Okay, next story. Sorry, I keep moving the camera. All right, next story. Najee Harris. So, there it goes. Najee Harris. He didn't participate in the Steelers minicamp. Now, it was that seemed like a big headline, but really it's not. Um, Tomlin even said like it's not super injury related, and also the mini camp was more for them to see like some of the lesser known players. So I'm not super concerned about Najee in that respect. I think he's going to be healthy and fine, and I think that honestly his value he's going in the seventh round sometimes in redraft leagues and 12 teams, so that's incredible. Um, but because they declined his fifth year option, I always just try my best to think almost like a GM. Like if I decline this guy's fifth year option, I need to see him go out there and completely dominate, like a la Josh Jacobs when he got declined his fifth year option, or I need to see what I have back here. And what I have back here is Jalen Warren, who's been the peak of efficiency compared to a Najee Harris with the same scheme, the same running, the same offensive line in front of him. And so, yes, I'm drafting Najee Harris still ahead of Jalen Warren. It's just the carries are going to be there, and it's Arthur Smith's scheme. He can get over 250 carries this year. But I will be drafting Jalen Warren in almost as many leagues. I actually have more leagues right now with Jalen Warren than I have Najee Harris, just because of the value. You're getting him at the back end of the eighth round in a 12 team. I love that. And he also had so many receptions last year. I think that that's not going to go anywhere. And then there's obviously a chance where he could just be the guy. Like you never know, he could just be the guy at some point, and the Steelers say, "I want to move forward with Jalen Warren, and then we're going to get some backups for him." And so, yeah, love the value of Jalen Warren. So I'm not. I love the value of both players, honestly, based on how run heavy this team is going to be. But it's just something you got to keep an eye on when they decline somebody's fifth year option. I'm not talking about Trevor Lawrence. You guys saw the deal that he had. I think we've talked about that at nauseum. Um, Next story, I guess. So Jim Harbaugh said that Gus Edwards is on a really good track to be ready for training camp because of an undisclosed injury. I mean, God, you would talk about. I don't want to always be that guy that's irrational, but I will not have Gus Edwards on any team. I just can't deal with that. I can't deal with that. I can't deal with J.K. Dobbins unless I'm getting him with like my last pick in the draft. Like I'm just not sure what's going to happen with this team. They're clearly going to be a run heavy team. I'm probably not going to have any decision on this until I see them in training camp and until I see them taking their reps because these guys are so injury prone. And the one player you want to keep an eye on obviously is Kamani Vidal. He may have the potential to start a decent amount of games in a really run heavy scheme. So keep an eye on this guy. Next, Commanders. This is super annoying. This one here. Commanders head coach Dan Quinn said the team is not determined who their starting quarterback is. That's just a stupid story. Like, just stop playing around. It's not going to be Marcus Mariota. He kind of sucks ass right now. So you really need to make sure it's Jaden Daniels. I have 100% faith that's going to be Jaden Daniels. So I would not be freaking about that at all. All right, so next, Brees Hall, really interesting here. So clearly he's been kind of dealing with some sort of lower body injury, and he was sidelined during the mandatory minicamp. But he said that he could practice right now, but the coaches are being really cautious with him, according to the Jets official website. And so that's a good thing. Obviously, they're not trying to like overburden Brees Hall, but the thing people like me have to consider, and people like me being people who think that Brees Hall could be the number one running back in fantasy, is they may be managing his touches more than I'd hope this year. Um, I was hoping that this year he was going to get nearly damn near 300, close to 300 touches or 300 carries. He may lead the league in rushing, et cetera, et cetera. But that's if they truly use him in a workhorse scenario. And I think he's still going to be a workhorse. Like, let me stop. I don't want to freak out about that. But I do think based on just the way that they've talked about him this offseason, based on the offseason moves, clearly in the draft, they drafted two running backs. They drafted Braylon Allen in particular in the fourth round. I actually liked him coming out of Wisconsin. Big, powerful back. I think he's a better version of AJ Dillon coming out of college. And to think that Brees Hall is going to get 90% of the carries, I think is not true. Like, that's not going to happen. He may even get 70% and cede the other 30% to the backups. But I have to kind of come down off of my Brees Hall soapbox just a little bit to consider the fact that he may be splitting running back snaps more than I'd even would like. So again, to me, Brees Hall, he's still RB2 to me this year behind CMC. I've been kind of going back and forth between him and CMC, but at least right now I'm going to keep CMC at the top just because they don't split reps with CMC. And there's a slight possibility, very slight, that these backup running backs like Braylon Allen, Israel Abanikanda, he's still there. Those guys are going to get some more run than maybe I'd even like. So just something me personally got to work on accepting that. Next story, Sam Darnold is likely going to be starting. Oh no, Sam Darnold will be the first team quarterback when Minnesota begins training camp later in July. No duh. I actually think that JJ McCarthy, he may be the third string behind Nick Mullins too. And then the last story, this was a non-story, but this is something that people started really running with. So I want to make sure that we just quickly touch on it before we end the show. So Josh Allen, he said on Tuesday that he was working on improving his throwing motion this offseason. And there's been segments on a lot of different networks talking about, oh my God, Josh Allen, you never tweak your motion. That's going to lead to more interceptions, or like, why does he feel the need to tweak his motion? Is it because Stephon Diggs left? And I think this is just the stupidest story of all time. If you just imagine you're an NFL quarterback, imagine you're Patrick Mahomes. You often have like a trainer, and you often have like a throwing coach, right? During the offseason. So yeah, after the offseason, you just won the Super Bowl, you started getting back into your workouts again, you meet up with the quarterback coach. I don't I don't even think people just it's just critical thinking, right? If I'm a starting NFL quarterback and I meet up with a quarterback coach, am I just literally repeating the same exact things that I've done in the past, or am I looking for ways to improve? Rhetorical question. You're always looking for ways to improve. So yeah, I would argue to say that there are tweaks to every single quarterback's throwing motion in the offseason. So the fact that this again is like a real story is ludicrous. This is not real. Like, yes, of course, Josh Allen is tweaking things in his throwing motion. Sure, Anthony Richardson is tweaking things in throwing motion. Patrick Mahomes, damn near Jordan Love. I think everyone is tweaking mechanics of their throwing motion. Like we see this every year whenever they show different games. Like, yeah, this guy really improved his throwing motion. They'll do like the cool technology on the like NBC broadcast where they show like, yeah, he used to throw like this. Now he throws like this. It's just a lot more efficient. He gets the ball out quicker. Every quarterback does this. So this is a non-starter, non-story. People are looking for everything under the sun to make sure that Josh Allen is like outside the top 5 quarterbacks this year. He may not be QB1. A lot of things have changed for him. And he's gonna have to really rely on the rushing touchdowns, which is not as consistent of a stat as people may think. But he's still a top tier elite quarterback. So let's really just stop the panic. Stop the panic, guys. All right, that's gonna be the end of the show. Again, thank you guys for bearing with me. I'm just super tired, so I don't know if this was the cleanest show that I've ever done. But again, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, and I'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, it's gonna be live. And again, it's 7 p.m. every day. We're running this show, so make sure again before you get out of here, you like the video and you subscribe to the channel. Peace out, everyone.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.